All right, YouTube, it's time to talk about Charles Manson again, a topic again that, let's face it, it's been beaten to death, and I get exhausted even talking about it anymore, but once again, I find myself having no choice but to actually cover the topic because, and there's a link in the description, it's also on The Independent, but we'll take the original article. Charles Manson's fiancé wanted to marry him for his corpse. Source. The source is Daniel Simone, who just coincidentally happens to be writing a story about Charles Manson. I'm sure he didn't just want his name to get in the news. There's a big logical contradiction here, right in the wording in the article that I think we should probably point out. Apparently, according to this source, who supposedly is talking to Manson, let's see whether that's actually true. Star and Grey Wolf, of course, Alton Burton and Craig Hammond, want basically for her to get married to Manson solely so that they can get his dead body once he's actually passed away. According to Daniel Simone, and this is why I say this entire premise is complete horseshit and I would not recommend his book because I know that it's going to be a bunch of hokum, is this. Another reason, this is in the article, another reason the madman balked at the plan, in other words, he doesn't want her to marry him and get his corpse, is because he believes he is immortal. He feels he will never die, Simone said. Therefore, he feels it's a stupid idea to begin with. This relies upon the typical heebie-jeebie hocus-pocus view of Manson that has been long debunked. By anyone with common sense looking at Manson understands he is not this psychotic, deluded individual who really actually believes that he's going to live forever. He may present that face to interviewers for his own amusement, but let's face it, his parole officer, it's the parole board, has stated over and over, you can look up, I believe it's the 2007 parole hearing, it's right on YouTube. I think it was the 2007 one, I may be wrong about the year, but it was in that general era. Where it is stated, for the record, Manson has shown no evidence of any mental deficiencies or mental illnesses. He is not insane. He acts like it. He acts like somebody who is now senile more, but in the past extremely bored, no longer cares what people think about him, and acts out primarily as a form of amusement because he realizes he got shafted and he'll be in jail the rest of his life. The fact is, this article and Daniel Simone's claim is obviously wrong, and I'll tell you exactly why, because it is a logical contradiction. On the one hand, he's claiming Manson is intelligent enough to have uncovered this supposedly insidious plot to take his corpse upon death. That he was intelligent enough to know that, and that he's also intelligent enough, even in his advanced age, to string Star along and say, yeah, I'll marry you, get the license, keep sending me the toiletries and the candy bars, and then never actually goes through with it, basically in an effort to shill someone apparently trying to shill him. So he's smart enough to do that. But he's not intelligent and mentally rational enough to understand that he's mortal. I would think one look in the mirror for somebody who's in their late 70s now would tell him that he's not, that he's clearly an old man. He's had health problems. He's clearly aware of this fact. He had breathing problems. He's had other problems as well fairly recently. They had to tell people not to send him spare paper, specifically because the amount of dust in his cell was causing respiratory problems. He's clearly not dumb enough to believe that he's immortal while also being, smart enough and sharp enough to have uncovered this unsaid plot. My question is, how is Daniel Simone going to show that he's actually heard this from Manson? Rather than, he thought it up, he thought it would be a good idea. Because I'll tell you what, here's the problem. I could probably get a journalist, wouldn't really matter whether it's a mainstream journalist or not, I could probably get a journalist to believe any story about Manson that I told them. I could get on a plane, go to California, go meet with Manson, or go into the prison, get rejected, and claim that I met with Manson. And say, yeah, Manson, I've met with Manson a couple times. He told me that aliens were talking to him, that after he dies, they'll take his body, they'll reanimate him, and he'll come back at 30 years old and he'll be Jesus. And I could probably write a book based around that central extraterrestrial topic. It'd be a bestseller. and I could actually get journalists to believe me and plug my book. I could probably do that. As long as I was also willing to attack all the people that quite clearly do talk to Manson on a regular basis. Starr does. Grey Wolf does. There are others who've talked to Manson through the mail and in person on a regular basis. I have heard nothing from any of these people saying, yeah, that Starr is bad news, she's just trying to get his body. But let us remember, not that long ago, I think a few weeks, there was also another story saying she wants to marry Manson specifically to get his sperm smuggled out of prison to impregnate herself. And there have been people who've said she wants his fortune. His supposed son said that about a month ago. Well, she's just after his money. So here we have a disconnect. Manson has told these people, or these people have dreamed up in their own minds, completely different stories. One says Starr wants his money. She wants the fortune, basically the proceeds of his art, locks of his hair, and all this stuff. So she's trying to marry him to get a hold of this apparently six-figure amount. I question that as well. So which is she after? Does she want his sperm and thus his child? Or does she want continued income from all of his like musical rights and stuff because it would go to her through the marriage? Or does she want to put his corpse on display? Or does she want to break him out of prison? Or do they both believe he's immortal because they're both fucking deluded? These people's stories can't all be true. They contradict one another too heavily. This is why I can reject the helter-skelter scenario, because the music is motive thing doesn't work out when you consider the fact that people were well aware that Melcher was no longer at the address, so that goes out the window. There are all sorts of inconsistencies with the trial. There are breaches of conduct during the trial. His pro per was taken away for outbursts that were caused long after he realized he was going to be shafted and that it would make no difference. Then he was given an incompetent attorney. And Nicholas Schreck has already penned a nearly 1,000-page work detailing almost every minutia. From the time Manson's born up until the present era, what does this author hope to achieve? There are so many books about Charles Manson already, you can't really find anything else to cover except, and this is the one exception, dreaming up some new devilish theory and incorporating new things into it to make it saleable, to make it so that the book will have an audience. Well, Manson's an old man. He no longer has the shock value he did before. People don't get to see him dancing around and saying weird things because they don't allow that sort of footage in California anymore. So because Manson's no longer scary to people, because he's now basically amusing to them, they've started to focus in on Starr and Grey Wolf as public enemy number one. I spoke to Starr briefly. Yeah, I'm not like in her inner circle or anything. I spoke to Starr back in, I think, 2007, sometime around like October, November of that year, back when she was, I think, 18. Specifically when she started getting in, planning to go to like California and stuff. And at the time, I figured when she said, well, I'm going to marry Charlie, I'm going to date Charlie, I'm going to see Charlie and stuff, I said, sounds good to me. Yeah, at the time, I was more into Manson myself. I had no problem with it and still don't. It's her choice to make. But I realized then that something larger was going to happen with this. I think it was probably obvious to anybody else who was paying attention to the situation that, yes, this is a little bit of a turning point. And I think what a lot of people realized was that Manson was getting older. He's going to stop being exciting to people, and people are going to focus in on those around Manson. Why do you think I distanced myself from these movements? I don't have any problem with Atwa. I have a problem with some of the people in these groups that constantly fight one another. I don't have any problem with the concept of trying to shine a little bit more truth on the case. But I also realize that being too close to Manson, it's like being too close to a wildfire. It might be pretty from a distance, but once you get close, you're going to get roasted. Manson, I do not believe, is crazy enough to actually believe he's immortal. Therefore, this entire idea I reject. Either Manson told him this author, as his idea basically of a joke towards this author, basically at the author's own expense, and I would warn the author to take anything Manson says, if you've even spoken with him at all, with a bit of a grain of salt, because he's known to do such things. Or Manson said no such thing, and this is the author just trying to cook up a juicy story as a preface to releasing his book. I think either case is probably just as likely. But let's actually hear. Let's see you show that you've actually talked to Manson. If you supposedly know all of this stuff about him, if you know every inner working of his life, my goodness. Nicholas Schreck made a documentary about him some like 30 years ago or more, and is still in contact with him apparently today. To some degree, and you're going to say that your book is somehow going to contain new information that Manson file didn't. Manson now is a worthy endeavor as well. I think Stimson now is doing some sort of book or movie or something about the whole topic. But no, the idea that this harebrained scheme that they're talking about, oh, she wants to put his corpse on Lenin-like display. Sorry, but I don't believe it. I think it's probably bunk. I think the fact that it's only in the New York Post and the Independent probably proves that. And if it gets to the mainstream media at all, because the New York Post certainly is really more a tabloid than an actual news site, I seriously worry about the journalistic integrity of the people who wrote these pieces. In fact, I should probably contact these people and say, you do realize you're probably being fooled right now. Because this claim just doesn't hold any water whatsoever. So again, a topic that's been a little bit worked to death that I really don't like talking about too much. But really, who else is going to talk about it? There aren't that many people with large audiences that are really interested in the topic of trying to warn people away from some of this nonsense fear-mongering. Just one look at this article, one look at that one line will tell you Manson supposedly, again, last point here, supposedly he's delusional, crazy, and stupid enough to believe he'll live forever, yet he's smart and sharp enough and clear-headed enough to realize he's being used because somebody wants to put his corpse on display. I'm calling bullshit. I also call bullshit about most of the other stories. I think the only one so far that might have any weight at all is the idea that he might try to smuggle his sperm out of prison. And even then, who fucking blames him? He doesn't get conjugal visits and he might end up married, so, you know, why not? I find myself at a lack of caring at that point. I think that'd be pretty funny, actually. Can you imagine how many people would get pissed off? You know, for the first time you have a Manson child that actually is proclaimed as being wanted, legitimate, and not subject to any sort of diabolical sort of thinking, like all the other supposed Manson children. They're like, yeah, my dad's Charles Manson. Oh, I feel so horrible about my father's crimes. You know, I want to live a life of solitude, and here would be this child that was actually conceived by, I'm sure the mainstream wouldn't see it this way, but love. You may think that that's naive to think, but yeah, you turn Manson into this weird one-dimensional character where all he is like pure absolute insanity and evil. No, I just don't believe that. I don't see that when I see him speak. I see someone who primarily acts out because he finds it very, very, very funny to confuse people. And I think that this author was duped. If indeed he spoke to Manson, I think Manson's having a little bit of a laugh at his expense, and he probably shouldn't even bother with the book because it's going to get cut to pieces by the same people that talk to Manson regularly. But yeah, another Manson story, really funny. Read the article in the description, you'll see. You'll see quite clearly that this is a case of complete hokum. That's about all. Peace out.